we have Joe Zepecki, who has been in the news a little bit lately because he's running for chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Mr. Zepecki, thank you so much for joining us here on Civic Media.
Mr. Zepecki, so formal. I didn't think my dad was on the show today. And hey, I'm happy to just talk about like Yellow Jackets needle drops for the whole half hour. The 90s music is A-okay over here too.
Another thing we agree on. So you're running for chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. You announced this last week. What has the response been like to your launch for this campaign?
It's been fantastic. You know, I didn't want to charge right into this. This is not about me. This is about where we go as a party. And so after Ben Wickler made the announcement that he was going to step down after 6 very successful years and a lot of races won, I spent the week talking to folks from across the state, from every part of our coalition, black, white, rural, urban, gay, straight, you know, old, young, like across the board. It's really important to me that we keep everybody together at this incredible moment. And the response was overwhelming. And it was frankly a little bit more than I anticipated. Voices calling for change, for improving the way we do things, like our organizing model, like support county parties and neighborhood teams. And so with that and my background in communications, and I think everyone's agreement that the Democratic Party needs to find a way to communicate our values and our message better, I've got a lot of thoughts about that. We can get into some of it. And so I, you know, with a lot of encouragement and with a big team of 20 endorsers on day one, rolled out, and it's been building ever since. We just released 7 more new folks from Rock County and Milwaukee and elsewhere just last night. So it's been going great so far, and there's a lot of work to do. And I want to continue to hear from people across our coalition from all corners of the Democratic Party to teach me what I don't know and make me smarter. That's how we got to do this.
Yeah, I want to start by like full disclosure. I did endorse Joe Zepecki.
You were on that list of 20 people endorsing Joe Zepecki
on day one. I want to make that known on day one. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to ask him the tough questions. Like I've worked with Zepecki, and I think that's how we've maintained such a good relationship through that. But I think a question a lot of folks are asking right now is like, how are we going to promote bolder leadership amongst like elected officials to like meet the moment? But then I think there's also been sometimes, and we've talked about this, Dan, that Dems seem to sometimes negotiate against themselves, right? How can we kind of enter this new phase of leadership and supporting elected officials to meet the moment with bolder actions?
This is not a time to be timid. And I've heard it said in the last couple of days that if we're all just a little bit brave, nobody needs to be the hero. It ain't going to be, there's nobody coming to save us, right? This is not about one person. It has to be about all of us. If you are not satisfied with the leadership you are getting from your elected representatives, if you are not satisfied with your elected representatives supporting a particular person for continued leadership roles in our party when they're 140 years old, say so. That's okay. We can figure this out on our team, how we most effectively stand up as this Trump administration takes a blowtorch to the Constitution, to fundamental American values in a way that is scaring people, in a way that is like genuinely frightening. When you can take a student who is here on a legal visa in the dead of night, sneak up on her and snatch her, and like that is as un-American as it gets. When you can rendition Albrego Garcia, a union apprentice, to a gulag in El Salvador without due process, we have lost our way. And no one of us can do all of the things, but we have to start by using our voices. One of the ways I think we do that is as a party, we empower more messengers. It doesn't have to be elected people who speak for us. We all across this pro-democracy movement have a voice, and we have more tools at our disposal than ever before to use it. What I want to see the Democratic Party do is support folks. If they say, hey, I got something to say, we're going to teach and support you in saying it. We're going to build new ways to get to people because we are where the change is going to come from. And it starts by standing up and demanding it. We're seeing that at hands-off protests. We're hearing it in roundtable discussions about what happens when Medicaid gets cut by $800 billion. Like, it takes all of us. Angela knows this about me. I'm a coach. And like, to me, it's like, this is a team. This is a team game, and it takes all of us. We got a spot for everybody on our team.
Well, I coached first grade girls basketball this year, so we're both coaches.
I love it. Coach Dan.
That's right. So one of the things that you put out in in a press release when you were, talking about running for DNC or WISDEM's chair was about what you characterized as fundamentally reshaping how we communicate our values. One of the things you've really talked a lot about is that communication aspect, is that media aspect of it. And why do you think that is such a priority for you? Why has that, been such a big part of what you've had to say in the early goings of this, I guess, campaign? Do you characterize it as? Yeah.
Yes. Well, listen, let's acknowledge April 1st was a great day and we had a big win, and it's a lot better to win. But let's also not forget that we lost to Donald Trump, the worst person in America, in 2 of the last 3 presidential elections. And we're losing it because we are either completely abandoning the information space and how we communicate with critical parts of our coalition, or when we are engaging, they don't believe us. And why should they when we don't say it with our chest? There is nothing about being a Democrat that we need to be embarrassed about. In this top-down approach of these are the 3 talking points, and we're only going to talk about the economy, or we're only going to talk about housing. We're not going to talk about immigration. We're not going to talk about due process. We're not going to talk about how we stand up for our trans brothers and sisters and the entire LGBTQ community. It's not okay. My approach to messaging is we all are at our most effective when we are speaking authentically. That is much more credible. And so, listen, I may talk about an issue different than Angela does, and the people we talk to might have different things that they care about the most. If we get lost in the sauce of trying to be like, well, Jay-Z, you're going to be in front of a young, Latino audience, so you got to say these things, and then I try to match what I bring to what I'm supposed to say, they're not going to believe me. If I tell my story about why I think the Democratic Party is the only party for this moment, then they will believe me. And I think what we need to start by recognizing is the anger and frustration that people feel is valid. Think about how angry you must be to be like, I don't care if Donald Trump's a felon. I don't care if he's got 13 billionaires in his cabinet. He still is at least something different. And what we need to, I think, do is talk about how rigged and fixed the system is. The promise of the American dream is gone. It's gone. When the 3 of us who are all about the same age, when we came out of high school, we could have confidence that whether we went to a 2 or 4 year school, into a trade, or into the military, by the time we were 40, we could probably own a home. We could probably have the start of a nest egg for retirement. The 20-year-old in our house, the 20-year-olds that I recently coached, they look at that idea and they look at me like I'm crazy because we have let big corporations nickel and dime us to death. Oh, you want to work? Cool. You only get 29 hours a week. Well, why 29? I want to work full time. Well, if you work 30 hours a week, then we got to give you health care. What? Of course people are upset. They should be upset. And when we get perceived as defenders of a status quo that is fundamentally not working, whether you are black or white or Asian or live in a rural community or the city center, of course people should be upset, and we act like we don't even notice.
Well, that's one of the things that has been frustrating to me about the Democratic Party is they've been kind of cornered into this position where they've been defending a status quo that has no longer been working for people because Donald Trump has painted himself as this outsider change agent in 2016 and 2024. He couldn't really do that in 2020 because he was, having to run on his record and he didn't win. Mm-hmm. And so, I do think that is a really important point that you raised there. We are talking here on Civic Media with Joe Zepecki. He is running to be the next chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. And there was another thing that I saw, on Meet the Press yesterday. There was this moment with Senator Van Hollen responding to some criticism from Governor Gavin Newsom about, and he talked about the quote that he said was, "I think Americans are tired of elected officials or politicians who are all finger to the wind anybody who can't stand up for the Constitution and the rights and due process don't deserve to lead. Do you agree with him there?
With Van Hollen said that.
With Van Hollen,
I missed that. Yes, this is not about what's popular and going to win an election next November. This is about standing up for working people. I don't know if Albrego Garcia, if he had voted, who he voted for. I don't care. He has rights under the Constitution, and they were violated. Like, full stop. And for everybody, like for Donald Trump and his administration to accuse Senator Van Hollen of grandstanding, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Like, what are we talking about? And as I was having this conversation with somebody the other night, I said, well, you know, that now that Van Hollen's gone, maybe we don't need to send another delegation. I'm not so sure about that. I think if we let this story die down, that Albrego Garcia might die, and we will never get him home. And to be clear, if the laws and authorities of this country say that Albrego Garcia should come back and stand trial, fine. Bring the evidence to the courtroom. But in this country, we have never been a place where you are guilty and renditionable until proven innocent. And that is how the Trump administration is acting. And if they can do it to him, they can do it to any of us. And yes, we can be afraid of that, but we also have agency in standing up and speaking out against it and holding elected officials' feet to the fire to put an end to it, period.
Yes. And I think that there are times that some, going back to what you said about now's not the time to be timid, right? I think we all agree that there's like grave injustices that are happening, but the disalignment, I guess, is how we get there. And I think there's some folks that are like, we just need to take a more moderate stance. We need to negotiate behind the scenes, right? And there's, I think, like a huge kind of split in the Democratic Party, whether it's through Palestine or you're too left or what have you. And it's, I've seen some folks, even an elected official posted on Facebook today, basically trying to shut down some lefties for how they showed up in November. And I don't think that's particularly helpful. I think, people can have their analysis, but how do you unite the party while also getting folks to be more bold at the same time?
Listen, this is the hardest part about being a big tent, is we need to have room in our coalition for people who start a conversation about what's happening in the Middle East by declaring it a genocide. And we need to have room for people who start it by saying Israel has the right to defend itself. Our coalition can and ought to encompass all of that, because the Democratic way is, I believe, the responsible way, as opposed to what this administration is doing. So my approach is, you bring the biggest table possible, you bring all the chairs you can to it, and we hash this stuff out as a family. And it's okay to have hard conversations. It's okay to disagree. My 95% of the time friend and supporter isn't my 100% of the time enemy and opponent, because they disagree with me on 5% of stuff. And so this is messy. Democracy is messy, and that's okay. But we have to recognize that everyone is acting in good faith here and trying to do the right thing. That's the way forward.
Joe Zepecki is our guest here on the Civic Media Radio Hours, and we will be back with one more segment with Mr. Zepecki. So in the next hour of the show, and our guest in the to begin the 5 o'clock hour, we're going to be bringing on my friend Kevin Lade, who is an immigration attorney, and so. We'll be getting into that issue a little bit more. Obviously, it has been a top of mind issue in recent weeks with the case of Kilmar Albrego Garcia. But I think more broadly, this is a criticism that I have had of the Democratic Party for several months now, going back to the campaign last year, has been that the party's inability to articulate what it stands for when it comes to immigration. I think so much of the conversation just happens in the shadow of what Donald Trump says, of what the Republican Party says on this issue. And then I think it makes it so that it's always a reaction and never really saying what the party stands for. So in your mind, what do you think the Democratic Party should stand for when it comes to immigration?
We need to be a country that welcomes people from other parts of the world. We have been the shining light on a hill. We ought to remain that. We're the best and brightest and the smartest, and people who yearn for freedom can come to our country and become a part of the American fabric legally in due process and due order. And if anyone doesn't think that we can't do that while securing our border and ensuring we know who is here and stopping the flow of drugs like fentanyl from coming into our country and hurting our communities, then you don't believe in America. I choose to believe in America. We can do big things. We have done big things before. What has been missing is the political will. Since Ronald Reagan in the 80s, there has not been a modernization and upgrade to our immigration system. We were all 80s babies. The reason we liked 90s music is because we didn't know any of the artists in the 80s, right? And so president after president, political parties, both of them share the blame for not getting this solved. Where, it gets this that's kind of dirty word, comprehensive immigration reform. Of course it should be comprehensive. We live in a complicated world, but at a time when American birth rates are declining, there are two paths here. There is the path that the Trump administration is pursuing, which is to make more white babies and to figure out ways through public policy to promote more women to bear children and to grow our population that way. I believe the Democratic Party way is to support families so they can make their own decisions about starting a family or expanding a family and being welcoming to people from across the world. That is how we became truly great and the greatest country in the world. And we need to get back to that, because this demonization that every problem is the fault of the family down the street who doesn't look like everybody else, it's nonsense. And we've been through it before. It's how people used to talk about the Irish and the Polish. So none of this is new, really. We just got to get serious about solving the problem. And if this Trump approach is anything, it is an invitation to get serious about comprehensive across the board updates and modernization of our immigration system.
But don't you think Republicans would just come back to that and say, hey, you're for open borders. You want more people to come here. We don't. Or whatever their line on the, border security and all of that might be.
If we let Republicans, what they're going to say about us, define what we do and what we believe in, shame on us. When U.S. Senator Ron Johnson today is out here spouting 9/11 conspiracy theories and wants to reopen hearings to get to the bottom of what happened on 9/11, we can't live questions. We can't live our lives at worrying about what they will say. We have to say in more places, in more spaces, with more messengers from across our movement, what we are for. It is easy to be against what this administration is doing. We also need to be for something, and an immigration system that works is an awfully easy thing to be for, particularly because it strengthens and grows our economy in a way that tariffs and market uncertainty do not. And so that's the choice we got to lay out to people. Immigration is about our values, but it is also about how we grow an economy that actually works for people again.
So do you think the Democratic Party needs to adopt a more pro-immigration platform?
Yes. What's the alternative?
Well, I think the alternative is what we've been seeing for many years, where it's kind of this kind of squishy middle ground where it's just, you have Democratic politicians doing ads at the border or whatever it might be. I don't know if we've really had a politician to come out and say, I don't think the Obama administration really prioritized this. I think a lot of people have problems with what the Biden administration did on immigration. I think this is one of the big challenges. Donald Trump said that immigration was his number one issue in the campaign, not the economy, immigration. Mm-hmm. So I think it is really a big deal for the Democratic Party to figure out what it stands for and to be able to articulate it.
We're going to beat him on immigration. We're going to beat him on the economy. We're going to beat him on healthcare, and we're going to say it with our chest. That is the way. And if you are ready to revitalize the way the Democratic Party communicates with communities across our coalition, please visit joezepecki.com. Consider joining our team as we try to build a stronger Democratic Party that is capable of meeting this moment. And then you get to be on the same team as Angela. Angela, we love you. Thank you for your support, friend. And keep the hard questions coming. That was part of the deal. She's going to come at me when I'm wrong.
Yep.
We all are. Well, Mr. Zepecki, thank you once again for joining us here on the Civic Media Radio Hours.